Welcome back. Today, I'm here to discuss something that has been frustrating me about War Thunder for some time. Namely, the prevalence of Sherman tanks among the various tech trees and what that represents. To bring you up to speed, War Thunder has 28 Shermans in the game, with only 10 of those being in the US tech tree. There are more than twice as many Sherman tanks spread out among other nations as there are in the tree that created and made them. Now you may say that this isn't a problem. After all, the Sherman was the most widely exported tank of World War II. Surely it would be widespread among nations. Well, yes and no. Because of the design of this game and Gaijin's priorities, this at best ends up both crippling and homogenizing matchmaking, and at worst is a blatant slap in the face to US players. Let's deal with the most impactful aspect of this first. The overabundance of Sherman tanks in currently 8 out of the 9 nations available means that not only are Sherman tanks seen heavily in almost every battle, but on both sides as well. While Germany and the Soviets have their Shermans as event or premium vehicles, Britain, France, Japan, Italy, and China all have Shermans available for everyone, and since Sweden purchased Shermans after the war, I wouldn't be surprised if they get one in the coming months either. While Britain's 3 Shermans fit perfectly into RB matchmaking, France's 6, Japan's 1, Italy's 4, and China's 3 all cause a plethora of matchmaking issues. In realistic battles, all of these nations are subject to be on either side, meaning even a core team of American and Britain could face upwards of over a dozen potential Sherman variants. Whether it is the 75mm, 76mm, or Firefly, it is very common to be fighting Sherman tanks, which ruins the asymmetrical balancing of War Thunder. In simulator battles, nations are on their proper sides, but because 2 out of the 3 Axis powers have Shermans freely and readily available, identifying friend or foe is impossible, with Italy by far being the worst of the 2. Japan's Sherman is very slightly blue, but at a distance that hardly matters, and Italy's are even worse, being olive drab and only having microscopic decals that are either difficult to see at any substantial range, or are easily covered. What's the point of national matchmaking when both realistic and simulator battles include the same tanks? Any battle that features Shermans is guaranteed to have them on both sides, which is frustrating in realistic battles, and in simulator battles leads to team killing or being killed by a tank you thought was on your side. As of this recording, you can even make American tanks look identical to their Italian counterparts, as the icons Gaijin pretends distinguishes them can be put on any tank of any nation. That covers the mechanical side of things, but what about more subjective consequences? For one, seeing Sherman tanks everywhere makes battles feel less like a plausible conflict between the Axis and Allies, and more like everyone just playing with their favorite tanks. That's fine in arcade mode, where expectations of balance are far less viable, but in realistic and simulator, the long-existing problem of captured tanks is highlighted perfectly with the Sherman. If Germans have strong guns but weak armor, the Soviets have weak guns but strong armor, and the Americans have some of both, how is it fun to use your tank's strengths and weaknesses, when there is a good chance that half the tanks you fight are Shermans every single time? It is no fun to have to research the same tanks in every tree, especially when there are possibilities for much more interesting or logical tanks to fill in gaps or add content. France and Britain having some of the more common American tanks, like Stuarts or Shermans, is acceptable, as both widely used them in their regular armed forces during the war, and ideally should be fighting alongside each other. What isn't good is when Axis nations get these tanks. Japan theoretically should have some for their post-war service, but the battle rating that the Japanese Sherman is at puts it squarely with the Axis. The same goes for Italy. While the Japanese Sherman isn't as egregious, the Italian Shermans, and by extension Stuarts and the Hellcat, are. There is no excuse for adding those tanks to Italy, not when they are hard-coded to fight with Germany in every single matchmaker. If Gaijin needed to fill in gaps in the Italian tech tree, the better option would have been to supplement them with German tanks. Italy used German tanks in the war, and fights alongside Germany in the game. Why could they not have gotten Panzer IIIs and IVs, even Panthers? Is it historically accurate? Yes. Italy uses German planes already. Why do they use American tanks when they had access to German tanks historically? Would it make battles feel much better? Absolutely. You'd feel like you're fighting against the Axis war machine or with them, not the best hits of the United States. My final point is perhaps only applicable to American tankers. It doesn't feel good to see every nation in the game get the tanks that are supposed to be your tree's specialty. When players can go, why play America? I can play my other favorite tree and have access to the important tanks anyways. It makes feeling the US feel less special at those battle ratings. To sum things up, Sherman tanks are the best representation of War Thunder's growing homogeneity. As more and more of the same tanks are spread among tech trees, the uniqueness of each nation grows less and less. Tanks are unable to use their strengths and weaknesses to their advantage. There is less and less point to playing a variety of trees. Every battle feels the same in an unfun way. When we still have so many possibilities to add cool and unique vehicles to tech trees, giving everyone a Sherman feels like a lazy slapped-on solution. Gaijin has shown they can add tons of vehicles to this game. They shouldn't rely on free skins to perpetuate it. That's all for now.